morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on the Inside NASCAR. We're in the garage area at the Richmond International Raceway where early morning preparations are underway for this afternoon's Pontiac Excitement 400 NASCAR Winston Cup race. They didn't get to qualify. That was a washout on Friday. The Busch cars didn't get to qualify either, but they had one whale of a race here yesterday, an exciting finish. Mark Martin came home the winner. Let's go to our studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tyler Potter will take a look back at yesterday's race and preview today's race. Good morning, Tyler.
Thanks, Ted, and good morning, everybody. We are at race number 3 of the Winston Cup season, the Pontiac Excitement 400 from Richmond. Mark Martin couldn't do it last week, but can he do it this week? Win for the second time in a weekend. We'll take a look back at his win in yesterday's Busch race, as well as preview this afternoon's race. Plus, here's a look at what else is ahead in this edition of Inside NASCAR.
After capturing Rookie of the Year honors in the Craftsman Truck Series last year, Brian Refter found himself without a ride for 97 as he headed into the offseason. But then the phone call came. It was from former Trans Am driver Dale Phelan. He wanted to get into NASCAR racing. We'll hear from the duo as they plan their attack for the upcoming season. When Kyle Petty and Felix Sabates announced last summer they were going to end their long association, the speculation was that Kyle would end up back with Petty Enterprises. Well, the rumor turned true when the King and Kyle announced the formation of PE2. Our Ned Jarrett caught up with Richard and Kyle and found out their plans for the new family venture. All this and more straight ahead on Inside NASCAR.
Today's show is brought to you by Miller Lite. With the great taste of an ice-cold Miller Lite, life is good.
Start of today's Pontiac Excitement 400 in Richmond. There are lots of question marks surrounding the race today. Can Dale Earnhardt end his long drought? Can Rusty Wallace win for the 6th time at this speedway? And can Mark Martin make it 2 for 2 for the weekend? Our Stephanie Boyd has been at the track through all the rain delays and has a report. Stephanie?
Well, Tyler, Richmond International Raceway has a history of bad weather, and this weekend has certainly been no exception. Of course, this time last year we had snow, then last fall there was Hurricane Fran. Well, there have been no natural emergencies here this weekend, but as far as practice and qualifying goes, this definitely has been a disaster zone. First Friday was a total washout, then Saturday morning rain wiped out any shot at all of qualifying. So it wasn't until after the Busch race, when it was nearly dark, that the Cup cars finally got on the track for happy hour, their one and only practice session of the weekend. And that's when things got worse for Ricky Craven, Johnny Benson, and Kenny Schrader. Craven hit the wall, collecting Benson and Schrader in the process.
I can't honestly tell you what happened, but you know, there were cars coming. I should have waited till, should have been, you know, I just hate, if it had happened to me alone, it would have been different, but really feel bad that Johnny was involved in it. So, but that happened, and we just need to move on.
Thought, man, we're going to have another good race. Same car that I ran in the fall, and we're looking forward to it. And then I guess Ricky Craven decided to spin, and man, there's nowhere I could go, and me and another car hit him. Or I'm not sure if I was the only one or not, but it was, I know I hit him pretty hard.
Because qualifying was rained out, the field was determined by last year's points and postmarks on entry blanks, making all the first-year teams sweat it out. Greg Sachs, Billy Standridge, and Mike Wallace didn't make the cut. David Green and Chad Little just barely got in.
Well, they go by those postmarks, I guess, on the entry blanks, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who did get in thanking their receptionist when they get home on Monday. Luckily, we're one of those, so give us a chance to get out and run. And we need to do this. You know, we need it for John Deere and for the team, too. The last 2 races have been tough.
Richmond's one that I'm glad I'm in, and because I had to go home, that's kind of my kind of track to where I think I can get the ball rolling pretty good. So, and, you know, testing-wise, we tested really well. We ran some really good times. So who's to say that if we had an original car here, we couldn't have qualified well, but you know, just getting in these races all matters. It doesn't matter whether you're in the front or the rear.
Gary Bradbury got the last of the 43 starting spots in his first outing since joining a brand new team. Bradbury took over the wheel of the number 19 Child Support Recovery Fords just before heading to Richmond, replacing Loy Allen, who was let go after Rockingham.
Kind of a last-minute deal, but it's really by far probably the best opportunity in Winston Cup racing I've ever had. you know, got a good program here. We've got 25 or 30 employees, got their own motor program. Donnie Allison is the team consultant, got Peter as crew chief, Mark Smith, motor builder, and it's just really a great opportunity for me.
Of all the changes already going on, the biggest rumor here is that Ford may switch from the Thunderbird to the Taurus in the not-too-distant future. Of course, Ford officials here wouldn't comment, but they did tell us that with the Thunderbird's production time limited, that a switch to the four-door machines would make sense down the road. Tyler, back to you.
As Stephanie mentioned, 96 Winston Cup champion Terry Labonte will lead the field of 43 to green for today's Pontiac Excitement 400, followed by teammate Jeff Gordon, who will try to become the first driver ever to win 3 straight to start a season. Row 2 will be the two Dales, Jarrett followed by Earnhardt, who is looking to end a 30-race winless streak. In the third row will be yesterday's Busch winner Mark Martin, followed by Ricky Rudd in his Tide ride. Rudd looking for his third top 10 of the year. Row 4 will be 5-time Richmond winner Rusty Wallace, flanked by Sterling Marlin in the Kodak Chevy. And rounding out the top 10 is Bobby Hamilton in the King's STP Pontiac and last fall's night race winner at Richmond, Ernie Irvin. Well, Mark Martin's on a roll. Last week he won the Goodwrench 200 and the pole for Sunday's race at the Rock. Yesterday he captured his 28th Busch Grand National victory by winning the Hardee's 250. Let's take a look at those highlights plus the Napa 200 truck race from Tucson. Rain delayed the start of yesterday's Hardee's Fried Chicken Challenge 250, so much so that the cars ran about 50 laps before the drop of the green flag. Points leader Randy LaJoy, who led the race in its early stages, hits the wall 3/4 of the way through to all but end his day. Jeff Burton appeared to have the car to beat. After starting 41st, Burton took over the lead on lap 61. He would lead for 180 laps until Jason Keller and Mark Martin passed him at the 3 rollout of turn 4 toward the white flag. As Keller got underneath Burton, he nudged the rear of the number 9 car and out of the lead. Keller then led until the backstretch when his car wobbled, allowing Martin to take the checkered flag for the second straight week. Keller and Burton finished 5th and 6th, respectively, after Burton smacked the 57 car from behind, sending the two spinning across the finish line. Jeff Green, Steve Park, and Phil Parsons finished 2, 3, and 4.
At least one of the Roush cars won. The guy that finished that thought he was going to win a race, he didn't deserve to. You know, you can't drive like that. This is professional racing. He obviously don't know that. He's got a lot to learn.
You know, I was racing to win, and it got a little close, and I had newer tires, and he knew that, so he's guarding the bottom of the racetrack. And after that, I had the race won and blew it. I drove off down into 3 and got in there too hard. I mean, I was it was just a mess up on my part. But
for the first time in 6 weeks, the Craftsman Truck Series was back in action for race number 2 of the 97 schedule. 32 trucks started the Napa 200 at the 3/8 mile Tucson Raceway Park, with 25-year-old Michael Dockett leading the field to green. Dockett held the top spot until just before the lap 101 halfway break, when the leaders got caught up behind the slower truck of Joe Ruttman and defending series champ Ron Hornaday, who was running 3rd. Hornaday slid by to take the lead and the money for leading at the break. The second half proved to be much like the first, as Rich Bickle got by Hornaday early in the second segment and stayed out front for most of the final 99 laps. Only 5 cautions slowed the field all day, the worst coming when Brian Reffner smacked the wall and his day was done in the number 66 Carlin Ford. With 10 laps to go, Hornaday made his move past Bickle on the low side and went on to win his second win in 3 years at Tucson, followed by Bickle and Jay Sauter in the number 3 Goodwrench Chevy. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, Ned will rejoin you from the 44 shop of Kyle Petty. The Pontiac Excitement 400 gets underway at 1 o'clock Eastern today. As we leave you, here's a look at the rest of the starting grid for this afternoon's race.
Takes a little bit of getting used to. Kyle Petty in number 44 this year on the side of the Mattel Hot Wheels Pontiacs that he drives in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series, but we'll get used to it as time goes by. Number 44 was the number on the side of the truck that Brian Refner drove last year in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. He went on to win Rookie of the Year honors, but lost the ride. But he has another ride for 1997, and Stephanie Boyd has the story.
When Brian Refner teamed up with Mark Simo and Ernie Irvin last year to drive their Craftsman truck, it seemed like a formidable combination. Together, they took the 1-800-COLLECT Ford to a 9th place finish in the points, and Refner garnered the Rookie of the Year title. But when the season was over, Refner was let go, and he found himself looking for another ride. How surprised were you when they said, hey, we're going to put another driver in the seat?
Well, you get the feeling that things aren't going the way you want them to. And, and there's one thing I learned when it got to full-time racing or professional racer is, a lot of finger pointing goes on, and there's a lot of people who look for the easy answer, and, drivers are one of them, and crew chiefs, and, they're one of the first things to go. So, I didn't totally unsuspect it. In the long run, I think this is the best thing for myself. I've got a great bunch of people here, and I really look forward to this year.
But what was there to finger point about? Because, you were the Rookie of the Year, and you were 9th in points.
Well, there's a lot of things people don't see. There's the insides of every team. To make things click, it takes a lot of people. And, if people don't think the driver's doing his job or whatever, if there's a lot of what would you call it, discomfort, and think he's not capable of it, that's just not going to work. The people aren't going to work for you, and I felt we really wanted to win a race, I felt we were capable of it, and myself, that was an aspect that I didn't look forward to, so, there's so many things that can go on in a race team that's hidden from the outside, and that needs to be that way because race teams start bringing out the ugly side of their problems. They need to fix them and continue on.
And continuing on is exactly what Refner is doing. In December, he was hired by former Trans Am driver Dale Phelan, who gave up the steering wheel at the end of '96 to start his own NASCAR truck team. Because it is so difficult to get out of the cockpit, what was the deciding factor? What made you decide to do that?
The last time was 5 broken ribs, so right here, and I still feel them. I had at Road America, I had a tire go down on me unexpectedly. It turned out to be a defective tire. And I hit a bridge embankment, but it made me realize that there's many things I can't control. The preparation can only go to a certain level, and as skilled or unskilled as I might be, I can only control so many things. And there's some that are going to happen, and I have a lot of responsibilities, several companies, a lot of people that count on me. I have a terrific family. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son, a lovely wife. And after the experience of Road America, I really had to reevaluate my driving. And it was painful, to make that decision. And I'm not a spring chicken anymore either. I was competing with some very capable factory-paid drivers in the Trans Am Series. And I started relatively late in life, and so my career objectives, I guess, would be different than theirs. I'm not making a lifelong career out of it. For me, it was a hobby. So it was a painful decision, but I made it.
And once you made that decision, what was it about Brian Refner that appealed to you and said, this is the guy that I want driving my trucks?
Good question, because we evaluated several. And here again, I think being a driver really helped. We had 3 separate test days where each of the drivers were given a full day with the car. And I wanted to start them with the same vanilla setup each day. And I wasn't interested in how fast someone went. I was interested in the progression from the morning to the afternoon, the relationship, the feedback. The most important thing to me that a driver, other than obvious driving skills, which all 3 candidates had, was the ability to feed back information to the team so that we can help set the car up better. Brian was excellent at that.
And Refner's feedback will be especially important to Phelan and the number 66 Carlin team, since most of the guys working on the truck come from other forms of motorsports. It also helps that Reffner already has a year under his belt in the Truck Series, although he's quick to point out that he's far from a veteran.
For me to say I'm a wealth of knowledge would be pretty bad to say, because all I can do is bring the basics that I've learned, and that's pretty much what everybody else has here. There's a lot of basics in racing. Truck racing has its ins and outs, and that's the only part that I can bring. The rest of it, if you don't have, there's drivers have to have a certain talent, you can't train them. And it comes the same with crew people and crew chiefs. They have to have a certain talent and make calls without having to spend a lot of time worried about it.
Are you guys capable of winning races your first year together, especially coming together as quickly as you did?
I think so. I shouldn't say I think so. I'm almost positive we can win races. We need a small learning curve, because there's some tracks that we don't have setups for, and we have to build on what we have to get there. But if we go back to a track, that's one thing every one of these people here strive for, is gaining information. They know the position they're in, and if we can't come back to the same place, or a place that looks like something where we've been to, and put all that information together, I'd be real surprised if we weren't twice as strong.
So any predictions where you guys are going to be at the end of the '97 season?
My personal goal, I'd like to be in the top 5, whether it's realistic or not, in points. I don't know, a top 10 is definitely a reasonable goal. And I still, after that first NASCAR win, I really want to strive for that. And by the end of the year, I think we'll leapfrog pretty good and be a strong contender.
Hi, my name is Craig Lund, mechanic and tire changer for Kyle Petty's Hot Wheels Pontiac. Today we're going to be talking about brake systems. This is a Brembo brake system. This is the typical intermediate style brake we run at Charlotte, Atlanta, Michigan. This is a short track rotor. We run at Martinsville, Richmond, places like that, Phoenix. You can see the difference in the surface area of the pads. There's much more here versus this that we run at Charlotte and places like that. The difference in the rotors are the vanes, more cooling and thickness, and it just to last a lot longer, like places at Martinsville where you need more brake.
The PE2 race shops are located in the old Raymock building near Concord, North Carolina. This is the shop that Bob Rahilly and Butch Mock had when they were fielding cars for Neil Bonnet and Morgan Shepherd a number of years ago. And the building was available for Kyle Petty when he was putting his new team together, so here they are. Of course, Richard Petty is involved in this team as well. We had a chance to talk to Richard and Kyle this past weekend at Rockingham, so let's join that conversation. Richard, was it inevitable that you two would get back together and basically the same team again?
Yeah, I think even back in '83, '84, when we all split the thing up, eventually we knew that he would come back. Whether he'd come back as a driver, came back to own the place, or whatever it was, he would finally come back to Petty Enterprises. So this is just sort of one step in that direction.
How important was that to you?
Well, I think it's a situation, Ed, where over a period of time, you say, okay, how long do you want to do this and what's going on, and you want it to continue, and what better way to do it than to let one of your kids have it to be able to do with. And, that's sort of the way it was from my father to me, and I feel like if I can pass it on to Kyle, then it just makes me feel good about it.
And Kyle, the timing seemed to be right.
Well, it seemed to be right for me for a number of reasons. Like he said, we were together back in the early 80s, and the reason that we ended up going our separate ways was because we couldn't maintain 2 cars out of one shop. Obviously, it was easier for Richard Petty to go out and get a ride in 1982 than it was for Kyle Petty. I was just starting off. So timing-wise for me, it's a good time because I've got 2 sons, Adam and Austin. Adam's 16, Austin's 14, and Adam thinks he wants to kind of dabble in this stuff. So it brings me full circle back to almost the same place I started, where now Adam can work out of my shop and work out of my father's shop some, and you know, you feel like he's starting in a Petty Enterprise car too, and that was important to me since my grandfather started in one, my father started in one. I started in one. I had to let Adam or Austin, whichever one wanted to be a race car driver, start in a Petty Enterprise car also.
Now, this is not being operated out of Petty Enterprises. Explain how the deal works.
Basically, the way we approached it is obviously we're not sitting here as a Rick Hendricks or a Jack Roush or somebody who has the financial capabilities from other businesses to make their racing teams work. What makes our racing teams work are the sponsor dollars. And, you know, we make them work internally. So what happens was, he's got Petty Enterprise over in Level Cross. We felt like we wanted to start a multi-car team, but we felt like if I just jumped in at Petty Enterprises, that it's the same old thing. You have a team that's up here, you start a team, chances are it doesn't pull this team up, it pulls this team down. I didn't want to pull down Bobby Hamilton and Robbie and all those guys that started the SDP team. So what we basically started was a separate team over in Concord, in the old Raymock shop. And we plan on building it parallel. And at some point in time, when my team gets up to this level, or PE2 gets up to the level where we feel like they're compatible, then we can combine both of them into one group and have a multi-car team.
You have been involved with multi-car teams. Really, I guess you and your dad were among the first to use that concept.
Yeah, we used to run them all the time. The big situation there when we run two teams, a couple times we run them with Pete Hamilton and Betty Baker with a sponsorship deal. But even before that, I was the main driver. So anybody else came in, it wasn't really it was just a team car. It wasn't really a two-team operation, and everybody realized that. And so it was not hard for the drivers or the crews to work in that direction. Now, when you start the second team, then both teams try to be equal. It's not a deal, like I say before, it didn't really make that much difference. Now it makes a lot of difference. So it's a little bit harder to get that thing going now and keep all the drivers and especially the crews from being jealous of each other.
Kyle, putting the team together, is that a bigger challenge than you thought it might be?
Yeah, it's a lot bigger. You know, he talks about the Phoenix win and just enjoying the fact that he had been able to assemble a team with Robbie and Bobby and Rick and everybody and said, okay, I put this team together, and they went out and won races, and that was a big accomplishment. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction in that, you know what I mean? I think I was happier that they won Phoenix than anybody else was because it showed me that I was headed in the right direction. I wasn't being an idiot by starting my own deal and teaming up with these guys. But, yeah, that's been a hard part because chemistry is so important here. You know how it is. You walk through this garage area week in and week out, and you see really good mechanics and really good drivers, but you don't see a lot of results from them. And then you'll see a so-so driver and a so-so mechanic, and they're knocking on the door every week to win races, and you're thinking, why are they there? And it's a chemistry thing. And, you know, putting together the deal with David and with Bobby Kennedy and those guys and bringing that whole group together, you know, we thought about it long and hard before we hired a bunch of people. We just didn't go out. We're still hiring people. We're working on with a limited number of people right now, but we want to make sure the people we hire are the right people. And it's been hard, but it's been a lot of fun to us.
We need to break away for these short messages, then we'll come back and rejoin that conversation with Richard and Kyle Petty, so you stay with us.
You can open as many doors for your son or for anybody that you want to, but once that door is open, they've got to stay and keep that door open. And I've been very fortunate and very blessed to be able to win a few races and run fairly competitive off and on and be able to attract other sponsors and stay there, but the Petty name was definitely a plus in the beginning.
Jay's basically a newcomer in a 3 truck, and that's an awful good team. And you know, Toby Porter's won a lot of races on the short track, so there's a couple of them that got potential running real well. It's just, you know, they're going to have to take their knocks like the rest of us did.
There's going to be a number of them. You know, you have Tony Raines, who's come out of ASA. He's going to run real well. Kenny Irwin Jr. is going to run good. Stacy Compton. There's a lot of guys with a bright future in this sport.
Kenny Irwin, you know, he's a rookie. He comes out winning some races a lot. Toby Porter, I mean, there's a lot of ASA guys that come into this series with a lot of experience, and I think you're going to see some of them might have their first wins this year.
The Petty family has been a part of NASCAR Winston Cup racing since it started. Lee Petty, Richard's dad, won 54 races before he retired. Richard won 200 along with 7 championships, and Kyle has 8 wins to his credit. The family has made major contributions to the sport of auto racing. Of course, it's been good to them along the way, too. Now let's rejoin our conversation with Richard and Kyle. Is there a complete sharing of information between the two teams?
Yeah, right now there is. Because right now I'm working without a net, without having any points, without having anything to fall back on. I'm working without a net. Our key goal in going to Daytona was we went down there and, you know, we all sat down and talked and we tested the cars, and they said, okay, we're going to give Kyle the stuff that'll get him in the race. Now, once he's in the race, he's going to have to swim, sink or swim on his own, but we're going to get Kyle in the race. And, you know, things didn't work out exactly like we wanted to down there, but we still ended up in the race. Same thing with this race at Rockingham, at Richmond, at Atlanta. Until we get a little cushion or get a little points under our belt and have a little bit of background to fall back on, then yeah, we're sharing everything we can. And hopefully on down the road, we'll continue to share stuff, because it makes it easier for us to compete against the other multi-car teams.
With your schedules, are you able to get together as a family a few times a year?
Yeah, we do a pretty good job of it, I think. Most all of them live within, 15 or 20 miles. I got one daughter that lives in Richmond, but, Christmas, we go to Wyoming after Christmas and take the whole family out there. Thanksgiving, we can usually get together. Then birthday parties and stuff, just according to what the circumstance. We can get 2/3 of them together pretty easily, and most of the time we can get a whole bunch of them together.
And Kyle, this is still important to you, too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely so. I think, when you look at the sport, like it is, and you say, it is a relatively young sport compared to other sports in America, when you look at it in terms of that, and the growth potential is still there for us. But, when you look at my grandfather racing and obviously my father and my uncle racing and being around it, and then I come in, and I was maybe the one that tried to step away from it and step away from the family thing a little bit, you end up right back in it, because I've got 2 sons. And I think you get to that age where you say, yeah, this is important. We've built a foundation here. We've built something. And, to have Adam and Austin come along behind me, you know how it is with Dale coming along after you. I don't think there's a prouder thing that could happen to a father than to see their sons want to follow in the same footsteps that he did.
Now, Richard could tell you something about driving race cars, and I'm sure it's been a big help in that all along, but I'm sure, too, that the Petty name has helped you to open doors.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. And that's what I said from the very beginning. And that's what's different about this sport than other sports. We grow up in the sport. I grew up in the sport. Kids grow up in the sport. And so you've got that entry into the sport because your father was there. And you can come in and work on cars, or you can come in and drive. And that was a big help. It was a big plus in getting sponsors in the very beginning. It was a big plus in getting people to want to come and work at Petty Enterprise. And they'd come and they'd want to work for Richard Petty, and they get shuffled off onto my car, but that was okay. They didn't seem to mind because they were working there. But the thing was that at the same time it opened doors in a lot of ways. A lot of people looked at me and said, well, he's got everything handed to him. And you know how it is. You can open as many doors for your son or for anybody that you want to. But once that door is open, they've got to stay and keep that door open. And I've been very fortunate and very blessed to be able to win a few races and run fairly competitive off and on and be able to attract other sponsors and stay there. But the Petty name was definitely a plus in the beginning.
Do you miss driving, Richard?
Sometimes. I really missed it when I first quit. The first go around all the tracks, the first year was really, really a big withdrawal. Even though I'd worked on it the year before, knowing that I wasn't coming back and driving it, still a big withdrawal deal. And now I can come and enjoy just being the owner, talking to the boys, trying to help with the car and stuff like that. And again, when we wound up winning in Arizona, that was the payback for all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do miss driving, but I've went on with my life to the next stage now, and now I'm sort of getting away from that part of it.
Do you tell Kyle and Bobby Hamilton how to drive the race car?
I don't think they drive like I drove. I talked to them a little bit about it, especially Bobby. Kyle don't listen to nothing. So, and I say, why don't you try this line or try that line, or what if you do this or that? And I say, try it. If it don't work, you go back to what you're doing. But a lot of times they'll listen. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't.
Richard, we've seen the family aspect of this sport over the years. And of course, you've been one of the leaders in that. And that seems to be important to you, but it also seems to be important to this sport to have that family connection.
I think that's one of the things that NASCAR Winston Cup racing has that a lot of other sports don't have, is the comradeship of the family within that business, and then the family beside the car that's next to them. And I guess that no matter what you see and what you read and stuff, I think everybody still believes in family, no matter what's going on. And you know, they run all these situations where they talk to people, you know, how important is family. I think most everybody thinks family is important, even though they might not can keep their family together. And this is something that, you know, with a football player or a golfer or a baseball player stuff, you know, they go out and participate by themselves. They are really in a different atmosphere than what we are at the racetrack. They don't mingle with the fans and stuff like that. We still do that. And as long as we can do that and keep the family, then I think the family is a drawing part, because when I first started, you know, there was daddies brought their kids. Now those kids have grown up and they're bringing their kids to see Kyle. And hopefully those people will grow up and bring them to see Adam. And, you know, as long as we can keep that going, then NASCAR can go forward.
Well, thanks, guys, and good luck to both of you the rest of the year. Of course, Richard owns the STP Pontiacs, which are driven by Bobby Hamilton on the NASCAR Winston Cup circuit. He also owns a truck that Jimmy Hensley drives, and he owns a driving school as well. It's called the Richard Petty Driving Experience, and here's how you can get information on that.
The sensation of the speed the first time that anybody does this can take your breath.
The King, Richard Petty, on the Richard Petty Driving Experience.
First time out, you better let off right past the start-finish line and get that thing aimed to get in the corner, because most people have never experienced the transition of going from a flat surface into a bank.
It's motorsports competition with you at the wheel. The Richard Petty Driving Experience. For more information, call 1-800-BE-PETTY.
It's enough to take your breath away.
The Inside NASCAR mailbox is brought to you by Miller. Our question this week is from Virginia Borden from Salem, Indiana. How many spotters do the drivers have, and how are they positioned?
Thanks for writing in, Virginia. I'm Mark Wallace with the Jasper Engines Federal Mogul Race Team number 77. Usually at most tracks, the spotters are positioned at the start-finish line at an elevated position to allow us to see in front of the driver in case there are any accidents, or to let the driver know if there's any positions that he can get into for clearing or other traffic situations. I really appreciate you writing in.
Send us your question on a postcard, and if it's used, you'll receive this fabulous shirt and cap from Chase Authentics, the choice of champions, the authentic trackside apparel of NASCAR.
Folks, we need to take a short break right now. Still to come, we'll have Wade's World, the Inside NASCAR Profile, and more, so don't go away.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your VCRs. Speedway Spoofs presents the hilarious Bees World 500. Join world-famous comedian Killer Bees as he takes an in-depth look at the funniest race in stock car history. You'll get inside information on viewing the race close up, where to find cool souvenirs, tips on grandstand etiquette, and much, much more. So race to your phone and call 1-800-380-7404 or send $14.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling to the address on the screen.
Our buddy Steve Wade stays on top of what's going on in NASCAR Winston Cup racing, so let's check in with him and see what he has in store for us on Wade's World.
Hi, I'm Steve Wade. You don't have to be told that the guy making all the news in this NASCAR Winston Cup season is Jeff Gordon. Gordon's name has been in the newspapers just about as many times as OJ's, although for decidedly different reasons. That's because Gordon has done it all. By that I mean he's won just about everything through the first few weeks of the 1997 season. He's won the Busch Clash, he's won the Daytona 500, and he's won the Goodwrench 400. As far as Winston Cup point races go, he's won 2 out of 2. Of course, that makes him number 1 in the Winston Cup point standing. Yes, sir, Gordon has had a torrid start, a far cry from last year, when he finished 42nd and 40th in his first 2 races, and still nearly won the championship. No question, over the last 3 years, Gordon has been NASCAR's most successful and prominent driver. For Gordon's fans, that's just the way it should be. But there are fans who aren't too happy with the way things have been going. These fans don't deny Gordon is a great race car driver. Before it's over, he may be the best ever. Still, his rocket ride to success grates on some folks. They believe that while he does have talent, he's been given all the things he needs to win, the kinds of things other drivers have worked years to acquire. They claim he's almost too perfect. He's young, he's handsome, he's squeaky clean, he has a beautiful wife, and he's rich. He has no rough edges, no raw charm. That's part of the appeal of a stock car driver. You can find that type of raw charm in a Rusty Wallace or a Dale Earnhardt. As far as Gordon goes, it's almost like he came out of a test tube, the result of the right formula. And some fans are just downright bored by seeing Gordon win repeatedly. Their feeling is that it's time others shared in the glory. You know, to be honest, the media doesn't get all that enthused when Gordon wins because they'd like the opportunity to write about or broadcast something fresh. Now, there is merit in all the anti-Gordon arguments, but let's make it perfectly clear that now is his time. He's earned his way into Winston Cup racing. He's made the right moves and joined up with the right people. He's learned his lessons. And above all, he is an extremely talented driver. He is now a major force in NASCAR and will likely remain so for some time. So be it. But as racing has shown us many times in the past, the day will come when it's someone else's turn.
It was a cold day in Richmond in 1990, but on the Virginia short track it was anything but cold. Ricky Rudd, driving then for Rick Hendrick, had his Levi Garrett Chevy out front early. The first yellow waved when Rob Moroso, Rick Wilson, and Mike Alexander got together at the start-finish line. On lap 87, the King was done, his Pontiac too badly damaged to continue. Alan Kulwicki was out front in the 7. A few laps later, and check this battle out for third. That's Kulwicki on the outside, Rusty Wallace in the middle, and Dale Earnhardt. The leader at that point was Jeff Bodine, followed by Rudd. Derek Cope and the Purelator team were riding high. They had just won the Daytona 500. But this spin and a crash later took Cope out of the Pontiac 400. Then Bodine took the Budweiser car behind the wall. Bobby Hillen blew an engine on lap 234. Kulwicki was out front, but with that slide through Hillen's oil, he was done for the afternoon. Phil Parsons was also collected. With just a handful of laps left, Larry Pearson went for a slide. This set up the finish through pit strategy. Mark Martin took on 2 tires, while leaders Wallace and Earnhardt replaced all 4. After that, Martin held on in the final laps for his first of 3 wins in 1990. It was a very happy victory lane, but a post-race inspection 2.5 hours later proved disastrous. A 2.5-inch spacer plate, which is supposed to be 2 inches, which sits between the manifold and the carburetor, was found on the Folgers car. The Jack Roush-led team kept the victory, but they were fined $40,000, but more importantly, they were stripped of 46 championship points. In 1990, that was race number 2 of 29. At the end of the season, Martin lost the championship to Dale Earnhardt by 26 points, proving that one race really can make a big difference in the championship.
The NASCAR Winston Cup drivers and teams and the Busch drivers and teams moved from the 3/4-mile Richmond International Raceway this weekend to the 1.5-mile Atlanta Motor Speedway next weekend. Now let's take a look at what we have for you right here on Inside NASCAR next weekend.
Judy Dunleavy might be one of the most recognizable names in NASCAR auto racing, but not for the number of times his cars have reached victory lane. The longtime owner has captured only 1 win in 740 tries, but he thinks he might be able to visit racing's hallowed ground one more time with another veteran, Dick Trickle, behind the wheel of his number 94. We'll talk to Dunleavy about his pursuit of win number 2. NASCAR Auto Racing lost a great champion in Alan Kulwicki when his plane went down in the mountains of Tennessee in April of 1993. While it's been nearly 4 years since his passing, his memory still lives on in all aspects of the sport. In fact, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, with the help of RJR, started a scholarship in the name of the former Winston Cup champion. We'll introduce you to the first 2 recipients and tell you if you might be eligible. All this and more coming up next week on Inside NASCAR.
Kyle Petty and his team are building a collection of Hot Wheels Pontiacs to run on the NASCAR Winston Cup circuit. Dale Phelan, who owns the trucks that Brian Reffner drives in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, also has a collection of cars of a different sort, and that is the subject of this week's Inside NASCAR Profile.
In the front room of Dale Phelan's Craftsman Truck Shop is the place where he keeps his pride and joys. Long before Phelan became a NASCAR owner, he was collecting some of the finest sports cars ever made.
The first car I ever collected is this red 427 Cobra over here. And I got that in 1974, and it's kind of interesting. I bought it from a fella in Pennsylvania, and at the time I lived in Massachusetts. I bought it in the middle of the gas crisis. I don't know if you would remember the gas crisis, but you're only allowed to purchase $1 of gas at a time. And so all the way from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts, I had to stop at every single gas station the whole way because you could only get $1, and I'd be pushing it up to the gas pump.
Next to the red Cobra is a black one that was once driven by Phil Hill and still has its original carburetor setup. Phelan also has a Penske Lola driven by the late Mark Donahue, and even a car raced by Penske himself.
Very famous Corvette. It's the first L88 that was ever made. It was a prototype in 1966 and sold to Roger Penske, and driven at Daytona and Sebring by Dick Goldstrand, George Winterstein, and won the GT class and became the Sunoco poster car. In fact, this car is the car that really got Roger Penske started as I will call it as an owner in racing. Prior to that, he'd driven, and this was the first year that he had someone else drive for him.
Many of these cars Phelan has raced in vintage competition, like this Wood Brothers road course car once driven by Neil Bonnet, and a couple of his favorites, the Boss 302 Mustang and this 67 Camaro. He's got the first Mustang he ever drove in the Trans Am series, plus a couple of collector Corvettes. And for you trivia buffs who'd like to know how Phelan got the number 66 he's carrying on his trucks this year, along the way his original number 99 was taken, so he simply turned it upside down.
Well, folks, our time's up for today. Hope you enjoyed the show, and our thanks to all the folks here at PE2 Racing for allowing us to show you around their shops, including the engine builder David Evans, crew chief Bobby Kennedy, Kyle Petty, and the whole group. You join us again here on TNN for more on Inside NASCAR.